wish to focus on the powers outlined in this bill that force banks to trawl through our private financial data, scanning for indicators of fraud and error, indicators that are not publicly disclosed, and flag those individuals to the government. These powers allow the Department for Work and Pensions to seize money directly from bank accounts without due process, suspend driving licences and even search properties and personal devices. These are not the hallmarks of a free and democratic society, but the tools of an Orwellian surveillance state. Let me be clear, we all agree that genuine fraudsters should be held to account, especially multimillionaire tax avoiders, organised criminal gangs and dodgy companies who exploited COVID funding. But the bill in its current form goes far beyond that. It subjects millions of innocent people, disabled individuals, carers, job seekers, pensioners and parents to unwarranted financial surveillance. It treats them as suspects by default simply because they receive state support. This is deeply unjust. The government already has extensive powers to investigate suspected fraud. Under existing legislation, it can access bank accounts where there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. But this bill removes the need for suspicion altogether. Put simply, this is mass surveillance. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are significant risks. We have already seen the devastating consequences of automated decision-making in the Post Office Horizon scandal, where faulty software led to hundreds of wrongful prosecutions. This bill risks repeating that injustice on an unprecedented scale, and we shouldn't have to wait for an ITV drama to expose that in the future. The DWP has already made mistakes in accusing benefit claimants of debt. As reported in The Big Issue, in July last year, a disabled woman had her disability benefit stopped and she was accused of owing the government £28,000, which the DWP later admitted was their mistake. A single mother was accused of a £12,000 debt when the DWP actually owed her money. Algorithm-driven financial surveillance will inevitably result in errors disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable in our society, the elderly, the disabled, and those already struggling to make ends meet. Even a 1% error rate in the AI system used by banks could lead to thousands of benefit recipients being wrongly flagged, unfairly investigated, and forced into lengthy appeals. Moreover, the government's own impact assessment suggests that these measures would recover just £146 million annually, less than 2% of the estimated annual loss to fraud and error. In contrast, £23 billion in benefits and support goes unclaimed each year, and £3 billion in claims are underpaid. Yet this bill does absolutely nothing to address those injustices or build a security system based on dignity and respect. Instead, it targets those who can least afford to be wrongly flagged as fraudsters. Madam Deputy Speaker, this legislation represents a rushed process with little scrutiny. At 116 pages long, the bill was scheduled for a second reading just 7 working days after its first reading. Therefore, an attempt to push through mass surveillance powers with minimal debate, bypassing necessary checks and balances that should apply to any policy, especially one that affects millions of people's fundamental rights. These powers are also legally questionable, with privacy experts warning that they could breach Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill risks creating a two-tiered justice system, one for the very wealthy who will never face this kind of intrusion, and another for those on benefits who will be subject to constant scrutiny, automated checks, and the threat of their money being seized, thus perpetuating harmful stereotypes about so-called benefit cheats, and therefore also distracting attention away from millions of households that are legitimately supported by a social security system that exists to support every single one of us when we need it. Civil society groups including Amnesty International, Big Brother Watch, Disability Rights UK and Age UK have all condemned these powers, warning they will entrench discrimination against the poorest and the most vulnerable. Madam Deputy Speaker, we cannot allow this to happen. We cannot allow the government to turn our banks into agents of the state, spying on their own customers and reporting back to Whitehall. And we cannot allow the presumption of innocence to be eroded by a culture of suspicion and surveillance. Nor can we stand idly by while the most vulnerable in our communities bear the brunt of this overreach. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not the change people voted for. Therefore, I urge the government to remove Clause 74 and Schedule 3 of this bill. Thank you.